Want to know how I made this loose seascape? Stick around to find out. This is actually a painting I did several months ago. It's some cove that appeared in my Windows lock screen, and I thought it looked so cool that I just had to paint it. And as I paint this picture, I'm going to show you a few tips on how you can paint loose seascapes and landscapes in your own work. First, try painting with a flat brush. I normally use a round brush whenever I'm doing portraits or landscapes or anything really. It's the standard tool for most watercolor artists. However, if I want to make a looser look, I will immediately go to the flat brush. I actually learned this whenever I started gouache painting. I almost exclusively use flat brushes with gouache. And for some reason, using a flat brush really helps me loosen up. I think it's because the stroke is bolder and it's limited compared to what you can do with a round brush. With a flat brush, you can only make so many types of strokes. So with this painting, I pretty much only use the flat brush throughout the entire thing. And I think if you do that, you will loosen up your painting style immediately. Next, go from large to small. This is really just a helpful painting practice in general, no matter what medium you use. You want to start with blocking out the large, big shapes. Use as big of a brush as you can for as long as you can. And then whenever you can't possibly get any more details, switch to a smaller brush, but not too small. In fact, if I was to go back and redo this painting, I probably would have started with a brush that was a tier larger than what I had here. I think I just got caught in the small details way too early than what was needed, and I think if I would have used the larger brush, I would have been focused on the big shapes at the very beginning. You see, the little details can be helpful, but at the very beginning of a painting, you're focused not on the little gritty details, but on the big forms, the big shapes. In this way, you're kind of like a sculptor, just chipping away at this giant rock until you see more and more of the form, more and more of the shapes, more and more of the details. And what's nice about this way, you can actually decide when to stop adding details, because with loose painting you want to add some details but not too much, because less is more. The difference between a tight painting and a loose painting is that a tight painting is usually very detailed. You can't make out specific brush strokes, the details are really intricate, so on and so forth. While with loose painting, the brush strokes are clearly visible. It almost looks like an unfinished piece sometimes. In fact, the artist is actually very intentional with how the brush strokes are laid out to make this really beautiful loose portrait. If you want your painting to look loose, try to limit the amount of brush strokes you make. Be confident and bold with your brush, trying to create the illusion of detail as simply as possible. I know one artist suggested once to just limit yourself to the amount of brush strokes you can use. I've done that with some of my paintings before. It didn't work perfectly for me, but it helped me get into the mode of, hey, every brush stroke counts when you're trying to paint loose. One way that I personally stop myself from getting too tight is I have a little spot where I think, hey, the painting's finished, and I take it a step back from there. I never get to that finished point. So that one point, for me personally with my regular paintings, this would be considered unfinished. So I hold off putting on the extra details, and I end up just putting the brush down saying, hey, this is finished, this is loose, this is great. I think I actually did a really good job showing this off with a mountainscape background here. I go in with a nice blanket color of greens and some grays, letting them mix together. And then I go back in with another layer where I allude to some of the hills and use the darker color to make the shadows. But throughout it all, I'm never tempted to try and paint every single blade of grass. I'm never tempted to try and show off more than what is needed. This is a loose painting. I keep it unfinished. Before I share this next tip, I just want to thank you so much for sticking around so far. I like making this content, and if you enjoy this content as well, I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video. Thanks! Now on to the next tip. Be bold. Now this really isn't a technique, but it's more of a mindset going into the painting. And if you have the mindset of being bold, it will flow into the way you paint your piece. Loose paintings aren't often known for playing it safe. While there's a time and place for that, sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone can shake things up and cause looseness to appear naturally. Try and take risks and do things that you don't normally do. Have fun with color. You don't have to capture an image 100% accurately. You're not trying to get the exact colors all the time. Try and mess with the different color temperatures, or simplify it down to a single color, a warm color and then a shadow color. You can even lean into the more impressionistic work, which is often pretty loose, where you can have a similar colors bunched next to each other and they imply a whole different color, or they imply detail. There's so much that can happen, but you gotta give yourself permission to be bold. Next tip, vary your edges. Having different types of edges in your painting will really give it that loose look that you're wanting to go for. When we talk about edges, there are really two main types of edges. The first type are called hard edges, also known as found edges. And then there are soft edges, also known as lost edges. With hard edges, you can clearly see a bunch of brush strokes and where a brush stroke begins and where it ends. It's like a hard line, almost like something outlines something else. An example in this painting would be with the shadows in the mountain. They are hard edges. On the other hand, soft edges don't have that clear start or stop point. They almost seem to fade into the background or fade into another color. With watercolor, you usually soften edges by adding water. It's a really unique aspect of this medium. You can see some of this happening with the sky in the background. I actually had like 3 or 4 different blues that I blended together, as well as the water in this painting. When making a loose painting, it's really helpful to vary your edges. You can make an entire painting of just hard edges, but softness is really the bread and butter of watercolor. Putting in soft edges will really give your painting a loose look that can't quite happen in any other medium. I actually have an entire video that shows what it looks like to make a loose and dreamy watercolor portrait. You can click the link in the description or check out the card here in the video. Really, a loose painting can be on any area of the spectrum. It can be made entirely of hard edges, or entirely of soft edges, or some mixture in between. But try varying your edges to see what suits your loose style. My last tip for you today is to enjoy the process. Chances are, loose painting won't come easily. At least it didn't for me. I was always pretty tempted to tighten up my painting because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. Make a detailed and realistic painting. And even now, my loose paintings aren't super loose. There's still some detailedness to them. But then one day, I realized that art isn't supposed to be a photograph. We're not just trying to capture reality with our art. Art can evoke feelings and emotions, and one of the ways we tap into that is with the way we paint. And for me, I can best achieve that goal when painting loosely. It may take several hours of painting to capture the looseness you want. In fact, you're probably going to fail several times over, but I promise, eventually, it'll just click. And no matter how long it takes for you to get there, have fun on the journey. Enjoy the process to painting loosely. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. I truly hope that some of my tips here will help you on your painting journey. And if you have other tips for other people, leave a comment and let them know. I have several other videos on the way, and so if you want to keep an eye out for those, please subscribe and be ready. Thank you, and enjoy painting.